Thanks everybody for giving me this opportunity to talk about my organization's work, specifically what we're doing with regard to developing early warning at the localized level, and of course also early action to accompany that. So to give you a bit of background, my organization, the Sentinel Project, is an NGO dedicated to assisting communities that are threatened by mass atrocities around the world. And we have two pillars to that mission, one being direct cooperation with the people in harm's way, and the other being the innovative use of technology. I usually give fairly equal time to both of those pillars, but today I'm going to focus just on the cooperation aspect because that's really, I think, the most relevant point for what we're going over today, or at this conference in general, regardless of what the specific tools are that are used in a given context. And just to give a note, when we mention assistance, that can take various different forms. Of course, the ideal is always prevention of violence, but we recognize that that's not always possible. So we also look at mitigation and what it is that we can do to help communities have a better chance of basically navigating dangerous situations and reducing the impact of violence. So the localization aspect for us is really important for a few different reasons. One is that all atrocities are local, and what we mean by that is that even in the largest scale campaigns of violence, ultimately those things are implemented in multiple different places over a long time frame and in various different ways. For example, even the largest genocide consists of potentially hundreds of massacres that don't happen simultaneously. They happen again, in many different places over the course of months or potentially years. And there might be also local variation in the way that that violence unfolds, which then means that there's also local variation in how we can predict and theoretically prevent or mitigate that violence. The other reason why it's so important to work on localization is that local community members are not just victims, but also first responders, much as is the case in natural disasters in a lot of cases. As we all know very well, it's generally the case that any sort of external intervention or assistance, if it comes at all, which is not a given, is often very delayed and inadequate. And so the people who we know who are definitely going to be on the ground dealing with these issues first and foremost are the people who are actually targeted themselves. And so that's why our goal is to work with them to better recognize the warning signs and then also the effective measures that could be put in place in response to those warning signs. And what that really means then is that supporting their preparation and resilience in the face of violence is critical. So a lot of these ideas actually have been part of our organization for a very long time, really right from the beginning of when we started. But we've spent a lot of our time over the last more than a decade now actually working in a different area, what we call misinformation management. So this has been a lot of work on setting up systems that engage members of the public in the process of monitoring, verifying, and stopping the spread of harmful rumors and misinformation that contribute to violence. And in the course of doing that, we've learned quite a few lessons. I could easily talk about this topic for an hour. But the main things that we've learned are the importance of responsiveness and having a two-way flow of information with communities. We don't work on just being extractive in terms of data. The idea is always to be particularly taking a crowdsourcing approach, although not strictly a crowdsourcing approach, to identify the information needs of communities and then respond to those, ideally with their input in a constant process of giving feedback, recognizing their information needs, and then filling in their self-identified information gaps. And that's relevant because we feel that the same general approach can be applied to early warning as well. And in fact, we've kind of, in some ways, fallen into doing early warning over the years as we've worked with communities and recognized the different warning signs that have come up, even in the context just of misinformation management. So another reason why localization is really important when it comes to actually monitoring is that there are gaps between events on the ground and reports, particularly when it comes to national or international reporting of things that are happening in, let's say, conflict zones. And this is all the more true when it comes to relatively small-scale events that are happening in remote or marginalized areas. There are, in some of the countries where we've worked, like South Sudan and DRC, there are, on an almost daily basis, violent incidents that if they happened in other countries would garner significant media attention, but don't really make it beyond the local information ecosystem, if at all, if they're even really recognized as being significant locally. They are significant, of course, but not necessarily in a newsworthy sense, so to speak. But they're very significant, obviously, for the people who are affected and from an early warning perspective. So working with local communities and using the right mechanisms for gathering and disseminating information helps us to overcome that gap. Community consultations are a really critical part of what we do because they enable us, as I've kind of alluded to already, to identify what are the locally relevant indicators, and I'll come on to that shortly, but then also the locally relevant responses that correspond to those indicators. If we don't have those consultations, really talking to the people who are most affected to identify what it is that is relevant to them, then we're not going to be very effective in trying to assist them. And as I've already kind of also alluded to, those people who are living in these situations on the ground every day of their lives are able to observe things, and I'll also come on to this in a moment as I start to sort of draw this all together. They're able to observe things that are not really observable by any other means. Small local signs that don't show up on social media or in the news media or anywhere else that can be gathered or monitored remotely. So I'm not going to go in detail through this table. It just gives some examples, more hypothetical examples of indicators that we've identified as likely being relevant in a lot of different scenarios, and also the information sources that could be used to monitor and measure them. We've also done, as I've been mentioning, community consultations, especially within the last couple of years. We did quite a few in South Sudan to talk about locally relevant things. And just to give you an example of some of those signs that are impossible to monitor remotely, we had people tell us about things like not just changes in military deployments, but changes in the dress and demeanor of soldiers who are part of existing military deployments. So the way that they interact with local people, just kind of their mood. Things like changes in local market prices, water deliveries, et cetera. These are, again, things that you just can't observe from afar, certainly not internationally. So that local engagement and that local reporting is really critical. And lastly, just to bring it all together, we see this as being implemented in a cyclical nature. Ideally, we would be following this cycle of direction, collection, and analysis of this data on a daily basis across all of the geographies where we would implement such a project. And at each one of these stages, local communities would be involved. It's not just about doing the initial consultations. It's not just about them reporting so that we extract data. We also want to engage those communities in the analysis stage of things to really understand what it is that all of the different indicators mean when you put them together. And then also the direction stage, which I should note then branches off into dissemination and response actions. So, those again, as I've mentioned, are things that could be determined in cooperation with the relevant communities, ranging from everything from just broadcasting alerts, disseminating alerts to the affected communities, up to implementing contingency plans for things like evacuations to safe zones. And so I'll leave it there, and just once again, thank you everybody for your attention. Again, this is something I could go on about for quite a long time. If anyone's interested in sharing your thoughts on this, ideas for how to improve the idea, or ways that we could collaborate, please let me know. I'll be around for the rest of the day, or otherwise you can feel free to contact me by email. Thank you.